Okay, let's dig into this. We're kicking off with a seriously dramatic moment in history. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots,
Mhm.
1587.
Right. Fotheringhayes Castle, February morning, cold.
Exactly. You've got 300 witnesses there just waiting, and then three swings of the axe. It's brutal. A state-sanctioned
It
spectacle.
really was a political statement designed to be seen. But, while Mary's life ended right there, her bloodline, that didn't stop.
Ah,
That lineage, steeped in all that Tudor intrigue, the violence, the sheer ruthlessness you needed to survive politically, it carried on for centuries,
winding its way through history.
straight into the veins of someone we all think we know, a princess who became this global icon much, much later.
You're talking about Diana Spencer, the people's princess.
That's her, Diana. You picture her and you think modern empathy charity work, right?
Yeah, completely. Landmines, AIDS awareness.
But today, we're doing a deep dive into something pretty startling. The claim that Diana carried, not just the name, but the actual DNA, the cultural baggage of a dynasty built on, well, murder, political deals, cold-blooded survival.
So beneath that sort of pristine aristocratic image,
There are direct, quite disturbing links back to the most bloodthirsty bits of Tudor England.
wow, okay. So that's our mission for this deep dive, to unpack that.
Exactly. We're tracing this darker legacy. We've pulled together a lot of historical sources, genealogical records, political analyses, even some psychological takes on how the Spencers managed to stick around for 5 centuries in such a lethal game.
It's like a family survival strategy almost.
Precisely. And the first thing that jumps out, the real aha
Mhm.
moment when you look at the sources, it flips the whole Spencer origin story.
How so?
Well, you think aristocracy, you think knights, land, ancient titles, right?
Sure.
The Spencers. Their story starts with sheep and what the sources bluntly call blood money earned during the absolute chaos of the Wars of the Roses.
Sheep farming. Seriously.
Oh yeah, big time. Warwickshire, 1480s. While the nobles are busy tearing each other apart, the early Spencers are building a fortune.
Henry Spencer died around 1478.
That's the one. He laid the foundation. Not with titles, but with wool. England's white gold, they called it. And for good reason.
Because it was the engine of the economy back then, right? Wool exports.
Absolutely crucial.
Mhm.
It funded everything, armies, royal courts, the works. The Spencers were accumulating serious cash while established land fortunes were, vulnerable.
So they had liquid assets in a volatile time? Smart.
Very smart. It gave them the leverage they needed. Money buys access. Access buys survival, especially when you get close to the monarchy.
Okay, so the sources show this clear path. They go from being these wealthy sheep farmers in Warwickshire
Landed gentry, basically.
to getting dangerously close to the royal court. And that leap, that required getting tangled up in Tudor politics, which sounds, frankly, terrifying.
It was a zero-sum game, life and death stakes. And the key figure here, the one who really propelled the family into that world, was John Spencer, born 1524.
What was his secret? How did he navigate Henry VIII's reign? Because that was peak terror time, wasn't it? Unpredictable king, executions left and right.
He was a pragmatist, a survivor. He understood you didn't thrive under Henry by being a hero or morally upright. You survived by making yourself useful, indispensable even.
So he wasn't just watching from the sidelines, he was in the game.
Absolutely. An
Right.
active participant. He aligned himself completely with Henry's new order, the break from Rome, all of it, and it paid off. In 1519, Henry VIII himself knighted John Spencer.
Wow. Knighted by Henry VIII. That's a serious seal of approval.
It was more than approval, it was a pact. It cemented the Spencers' loyalty to the Tudor crown, and the rewards started rolling in.
Like Althorp, he bought Althorp, the family seat, right?
Yeah, bought Althorp in 1508, yeah. But that purchase wasn't just about land, it was about access. Getting into those inner circles where, as the sources put it, secrets were currency and lives were cheap.
So they weren't just surviving the Tudor brutality.
No, no. They were beneficiaries. They actively thrived because they served the system Henry was building.
And let's talk about that profit mechanism, because the blood money angle comes back here, especially with the monasteries.
Oh, massively. The dissolution of the monasteries under Henry and Thomas Cromwell. It was one of the biggest land and wealth grabs in English history. Huge transfer of assets.
Religious houses dissolved, their lands, gold, everything confiscated.
Thousands of them. And the Spencers were right there, ready to capitalize. The records show John Spencer acquiring lands that used to belong to the church.
So they're buying up these prime assets, basically on the cheap, because the king sees them.
Exactly. That's the bedrock of their wealth. their ancestral home, their later influence. It's directly built on the destruction of the old Catholic order.
It's sobering to think the family chapel at Great Brington, their burial place, it holds the tombs of people who were deeply involved in this whole deadly game.
It underscores the core Spencer strategy of that era. Align with power, stay flexible on the morals. They picked the winning side, even if it was a terrifying one.
And this knack for aligning with power, even morally complex power, it doesn't stop with the Tudors, does it? Diana's lineage connects elsewhere too. Charles II.
Yes, absolutely, the Stuarts. Fast forward to the Restoration, and the Spencer family tree gets very intertwined with Charles II's complicated family life.
Complicated is one word for it. He had loads of illegitimate children, didn't he?
At least 12 acknowledged ones, while his actual wife, Catherine of Braganza, was childless.
And Diana descended from some of these illegitimate kids.
Directly, from two of the most prominent ones, in fact. Henry Fitzroy, the first Duke of Grafton, and Charles Lennox, the first Duke of Richmond.
How did that connection happen?
Through Diana's great-grandmothers, Adelaide Seymour and Rosalind Bingham, their lines trace back to those royal bastards.
So what does linking up with royal bastards tell us about the Spencer strategy? It sounds scandalous.
It sounds scandalous now, but back then, Charles II didn't just acknowledge these kids. He showered them with titles, dukedoms, huge estates, real political clout. They founded powerful aristocratic dynasties of their own.
Ah, okay. So marrying into those lines wasn't about shame. It was about connecting to power again, even if it was sort of unofficial royal blood.
Precisely. It was plugging into the newly restored monarchy, linking the Spencers to these influential, albeit constitutionally murky, power bases.
It connects Diana to a court known for being pretty lax, prioritizing pleasure maybe, and definitely showing that ambition, even if it started illegitimately, could lead to lasting status.
It's a recurring theme. The Spencers consistently managed to convert proximity to power, even scandalous power, into enduring wealth and position.
Okay, now let's get to the absolute core of the Tudor connection. And this name really jumped out at me from the sources. Mary Boleyn.
Anne Boleyn's sister.
Right. And this isn't just some distant political thing from the 1500s. This is a direct genetic link to Diana.
Absolutely direct. Through her father, John Spencer, the 8th Earl, he descends directly from Mary Boleyn.
And Mary Boleyn was Henry VIII's mistress before her sister Anne caught his eye?
Correct. Which puts the Spencers, genetically speaking, right in the middle of the storm, the Great Matter, the divorce, the break with Rome, everything that followed.
And this is where that really explosive historical speculation comes in. The idea that Diana might actually carry Henry VIII's DNA.
It's based on the theory that Mary Boleyn's children, particularly her daughter Catherine Carey, might have been fathered by Henry himself.
He never acknowledged Catherine Carey, though, did he?
No, he didn't. Unlike his acknowledged illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy. But the timing, the circumstances, historians had debated it for centuries, if it's true.
And Diana, the people's princess, literally carried the genes of one of history's most notorious monarchs.
A monarch responsible for, what do the sources say, around 57,000 executions in his reign?
Something like that. It's staggering. 2 wives executed, heretics burned, the whole monastic system dismantled, a reign of terror.
And the Spencers weren't just observers. They were thriving in that environment. Their connection through Mary Boleyn gave them, as the sources put it rather chillingly, front row seats to the judicial murders of the time.
And they used that proximity.
They certainly didn't suffer from it. Let's focus on the 2 most famous victims directly linked through that Boleyn connection. First, Anne Boleyn herself, executed May 19th, 1536.
Beheaded because she couldn't give Henry a son? The charges were flimsy excuses.
Utterly. Adultery, incest, treason, trumped up. It was about the male heir. And the Spencers, via Mary, were intimately connected to the political context of that, well, calculated murder.
And the details are just horrific. Henry importing a special executioner from France.
Skilled with a sword, not the usual clumsy axe. He wanted it clean, but also a performance, a demonstration of his absolute power.
Anne's final speech, trying to protect her daughter Elizabeth.
A remarkable performance under duress. But the detail that really haunts, the one reported by the Spanish ambassador Chapuis.
What was that?
He wrote that after the sword stroke, after her head was severed, her lips and eyes continued to move for several seconds.
Oh, wow.
That image, witnessed and recorded, it just captures the cold, calculated cruelty of the regime the Spencers navigated and, yes, benefited from.
And the horror didn't stop there. Just 6 years later, 1542, another queen is executed, Catherine Howard.
Henry's fifth wife, and also Anne Boleyn's cousin. So another connection for the Spencers.
And her execution. It was almost more blatant political murder, wasn't it? Based on paranoia.
She was basically a teenager, caught in a terrible situation. When rumors of her past surfaced, and she perhaps acted unwisely at court, Henry didn't hesitate. He literally changed the law to make sure he could execute her.
Changed the law?
Made it treason for a woman with a sexual past to marry the king without disclosing it, and potentially even framed it around her mental state. It was legal maneuvering to guarantee her death.
That's incredibly cynical. And the story of her practicing laying her head on the block the night before?
Utterly heartbreaking. Practicing in her cell in the tower. And her reported last words, "I die a queen, but I would rather die the wife of Culpeper." It speaks volumes about the injustice.
And all this is happening while the Spencer family is consolidating its power and wealth.
It forces you to ask, how do they manage it? Psychologically, morally, living so close to this level of repeated state-sanctioned violence.
It's a huge question, and the answer seems to be they didn't just watch, they participated or at least profited from the fallout. Which brings us to the next reign, Mary Tudor.
Bloody Mary, yes. Henry VIII's daughter trying to restore Catholicism, and her methods were brutal.
Burning Protestants at the stake, hundreds of them.
And these weren't quick executions. They were deliberately prolonged, agonizing public spectacles designed to terrify people back into the Catholic fold.
And the Spencers, how did they fit into that picture?
Again, as beneficiaries. When prominent Protestant nobles and landowners were executed for heresy, their lands were confiscated by the crown.
And guess who was ready to receive grants of that confiscated land?
The Spencers were among those who benefited. They acquired estates that had belonged to executed Protestants, so their wealth grew directly from this religious persecution.
It's grim, the descriptions from the time. People taking 40 minutes to die in the flames.
Screaming prayers while their flesh literally melted. It's almost unimaginable cruelty. And the Spencer fortune was, in part, built upon that suffering.
Which brings us right back to where we started. The execution of Mary Queen of Scots, 1587. This feels like the culmination of those religious wars that the Spencers navigated so successfully.
It absolutely is. Mary Stuart, the Catholic claimant, imprisoned for nearly 20 years by her Protestant cousin Elizabeth I. Finally, Elizabeth signs the death warrant, another calculated judicial murder to eliminate a rival.
And Mary knew it was her final act, the red petticoat under the black dress.
A deliberate symbol. Red, the color of Catholic martyrdom. She was playing her part right to the end, in front of those hundreds of witnesses.
But the execution itself was botched, wasn't it? It wasn't clean like Anne Boleyn's.
No, it was gruesome. The first axe blow missed her neck, hit the back of her head. The second blow cut through most of the neck, but apparently her lips were still moving.
Oh, God.
It took a third blow to finally sever the head. Pure butchery.
And then the executioner lifts the head, and her wig comes off.
Yes, the famous auburn curls were a wig. Underneath, she had short graying hair. The 54-year-old woman beneath the royal facade.
And the dog, the little Skye Terrier hidden under her skirts.
Found afterwards, covered in her blood, refusing to leave her body. It's such a small, pathetic detail, but it underscores the sheer, raw horror of the event. An event that symbolized the end of the Catholic threat. He did. After centuries of benefiting from absolute monarchy, he backed the wrong horse, you could say. He was fiercely loyal to Charles I, the king who believed utterly in his divine right to rule.
He even bankrolled Charles, didn't he? Gave him a huge amount of money.
£10,000.
No.
An enormous sum back then. He put his money where his mouth was, supporting the royalist cause. And he died for it. Killed at the First Battle of Newbury in 1643.
So his death wasn't just bad luck in battle. It was almost the inevitable result of the family's long history of aligning with absolute power, fighting to keep a system built on that Tudor model of terror.
That's how the sources frame it. A predictable consequence. But here's the thing about the Spencers. They adapted. Again, the family didn't collapse with his death.
No, what happened next?
The next generation produced Robert Spencer, the second Earl of Sunderland. And he might be the ultimate example of the families. Let's call it moral flexibility.
Okay, what did he do?
Contemporaries called him heartless, without scruple. He became a master politician, but his real skill was betrayal. Calculated disloyalty.
That sounds harsh. How did that play out?
He rose to be Secretary of State under James II, the last Catholic king of England. a position of immense power.
Okay, but James II was overthrown in the Glorious Revolution of 1688, wasn't he?
He was. Replaced by the Protestant William III and Mary II, a complete regime change. And Robert Spencer, he didn't miss a beat.
He switched sides.
Seamlessly. He managed to retain influence, even thrive, under the new Protestant regime by basically facilitating the downfall of his old Catholic master, James II. He played both sides against the middle.
Wow. So he didn't just survive the revolution, he profited from it by betraying his former boss.
Exactly. It earned him wealth, power, and a reputation as perhaps the most skilled and most ruthless political operator of his age. For the Spencers, it seems, moral flexibility wasn't a bug, it was a feature, a core survival skill honed over centuries.
It's like the Tudor playbook updated for the Stuart era. Read the room, figure out who's winning, and make sure you're on their side no matter the cost to loyalty.
It ensured the Spencer name, titles, and estates survived another massive political earthquake.
And this pattern of, well, ruthless pragmatism. The sources suggest it echoes even later, down to Winston Churchill. How does he fit in?
Well, Churchill's mother was Jenny Jerome, but her mother was Clara Hall, whose mother was Clarissa Wilcox, whose ancestor was a Spencer. So the bloodline connects.
Okay, so there's a Spencer link, but how does that connect to his actions?
The sources draw parallels between Churchill's wartime leadership style and this inherited Spencer trait. They point to controversial decisions. Gallipoli, a disaster. The bombing of Dresden, huge civilian casualties. His government's handling of the Bengal famine in 1943.
Okay, but hold on. Attributing those incredibly complex, desperate wartime decisions purely to an inherited ruthlessness feels like a stretch, doesn't it? Weren't those debated strategies in extreme circumstances?
That's the crucial point of debate, absolutely. The sources aren't necessarily saying Churchill was bad or acting identically to a Tudor courtier. They're suggesting that the underlying mindset, the capacity for cold calculation, the willingness to accept immense human cost for a perceived greater strategic goal might be part of that inherited Spencer package.
So the ability to compartmentalize, to see the big picture, even when it involves terrible collateral damage, that's the link they're drawing.
Exactly. The same kind of thinking that allowed Spencers to thrive under Henry VIII applied now to 20th century global conflict. It's a controversial interpretation, but it's there in the analysis.
Okay. And the Spencer Reach didn't just stay in Britain. It crossed the Atlantic to America's Gilded Age.
Yes, through Diana's great-great-grandmother, Frances Work, an American heiress.
Ah, the dollar princess phenomenon. Rich American families marrying off daughters to titled but cash-strapped British aristocrats.
Precisely. Frances Work married James Buck Roche, who later became the third Baron Fermoy. Her mother was an heiress to a New York fortune built during the robber baron era. Figure railroads, finance, massive wealth, often built on, let's say, questionable labor practices.
So it's another strategic alliance. British title meets American money.
A perfect transaction for both sides in many ways. It plugged the Spencer-connected aristocracy into vast new wealth while giving the American family social cachet.
And Frances Work's divorce was apparently quite scandalous.
Her eventual divorce from Burke Roche in 1891 was very high profile. Bitter fights over money, custody. It really highlighted that clash between new American industrial wealth and the traditions and needs of the British aristocracy.
It just shows, again, the family's willingness to engage with and even monetize scandal and changing social tides if it served their long-term interests.
It all comes back to survival and adaptation. And this whole tangled history, the survival, the betrayals, the profits, it's almost literally encoded in the Spencer coat of arms.
The family motto is God defend the right, isn't it? Which sounds, well, ironic, given everything we've discussed.
Deeply ironic. You have to ask, which right are we talking about? Henry VIII's right to execute his wives? Mary Tudor's right to burn Protestants at the stake? Charles II's right to install his illegitimate children in power?
So let's break down the heraldry itself. What do the symbols mean? It's quite complex.
It is. You've got quarterly argent and gules.
Which means?
Silver or white, and red quarters on the shield. Argent for silver, gules for red. Think wealth and blood right there in the basic color.
Okay, red and silver. Then there's a golden lattice pattern over it.
A fret or ore means gold. That fret, that lattice, often represents interconnectedness, a network, their complex web of high-status connections.
And cutting right across all of that, a black diagonal band?
Yes, on a bend sable. Sable means black. That black band cutting across the shield.
That's the symbol of the Dark Legacy.
That's the interpretation offered. The shadow of moral compromise, the cost of their success, running right through the family history. It's visually striking.
And it has 3 silver shells on it.
3 escallops argent.
Mm-hmm.
Silver shells. Shells are often symbols of pilgrimage, long journeys. We'll come back to that.
Okay. And there's one final, really potent symbol you mentioned. The confusion over Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard's remains.
In the Chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, in the Tower of London, both queens executed by Henry VIII were buried there, under the floor. But for centuries, there was uncertainty about which remains were which. They were sort of mixed up in historical memory and perhaps physically.
How does that connect to the Spencers?
It's symbolic. The Spencers are so deeply interwoven with the Tudor store DNA links to the victims, wealth derived from the system of the perpetrator, that their family history becomes inseparable from the very bones buried beneath the tower floor. The lines are blurred.
This brings us to maybe the most difficult but also compelling part of this whole story, the impact on Diana herself, the psychological weight, and maybe even the genetic inheritance. The sources mention DNA analysis.
Yes, some recent sociobiological research highlighted in the sources suggests that certain genetic markers associated with what's termed Machiavellian intelligence seem to pop up more frequently in the Spencer bloodline than you might expect by chance.
Machiavellian intelligence, that sounds bad, like inherently ruthless?
Not necessarily ruthless in itself. It's more a set of cognitive traits that are adaptive in highly competitive social environments. Strategic thinking, the ability to read people accurately, high emotional intelligence, and crucially, the ability to regulate one's own emotions to make calculated, long-term decisions rather than purely impulsive or moral ones.
Okay, so it's not a gene for being evil, it's a gene for being good at political games, social strategy.
Exactly. Traits that would have been hugely advantageous for surviving, say, the Tudor court or navigating the Restoration. Generations of thriving in those lethal environments might have selected for these traits within the family line.
So they became incredibly skilled political poker players, genetically speaking.
But that's one way to look at it. Highly adaptive. And the sources suggest these very traits might connect to Diana's own, sometimes quite complicated, relationship with the media.
How so?
She was undeniably brilliant at managing her public image, cultivating relationships with journalists, using the media spotlight very strategically. It was a kind of modern court she had to navigate.
So that skill with image manipulation, that could be seen as a modern echo of the same strategic intelligence her ancestors used.
That's the provocative link the analysis makes, which makes her death, that sudden, violent end of the Paris tunnel in 1997, feel even more tragic, like the culmination of this long family story entwined with power, scandal, and ultimately danger.
It is an incredibly profound irony, isn't it?
The ultimate irony. Diana, loved worldwide for her compassion, her reaching out to the marginalized, carrying this deep legacy of ruthless power brokers.
You could almost see her humanitarian work with AIDS patients, campaigning against landmines as a way of trying to, balance the scales.
That's a powerful interpretation offered in the sources.
Okay.
A conscious or maybe unconscious effort to counteract that historical karmic debt built up over centuries of the family, profiting from others' suffering.
Like she was deliberately choosing the opposite path, aligning with the powerless instead of the powerful, which was the classic Spencer move.
It certainly looks that way, which leads directly to the psychological burden. What was it like growing up a Spencer? Inheriting this history, even if it wasn't fully articulated? The sources talk about survivor's guilt by proxy.
Meaning she felt the weight of past actions even if she didn't fully know the details.
Potentially, yes. And this inherited weight could be a factor in her well-documented personal struggles, the depression, the bulimia, the patterns of self-harm.
How does bulimia fit into this historical pattern? That connection seems unexpected.
It's a striking analogy drawn in the psychological analysis. Bulimia involves a cycle, accumulating, binging on food, and then purging, self-induced vomiting, laxatives, a pattern of hoarding resources, then sacrificially purging them, often driven by feelings of guilt or lack of control.
Okay.
Now think about this historical Spencer strategy. Accumulating vast resources, land, wealth, status, and then during crises, being willing to strategically sacrifice or purge things like loyalty, moral principles, even people, to ensure the core survival of the family unit.
Wow. So the pattern of accumulate and encourage driven by a kind of internal pressure or guilt, it manifested personally in her.
That's the hypothesis, a tragic internalized echo of a deep-seated, centuries-old family survival mechanism, a self-punishing response to the burden of privilege built on such a dark foundation.
That's quite profound. And the sources also suggest she didn't fully grasp this history, that there was a kind of selective historical amnesia in the family.
Right. How do you live with this kind of history? One way is to strategically forget, or at least downplay, the uncomfortable parts.
So teach the kids about the titles, the land, the royal connections.
Exactly. Teach enough history to understand and maintain the privilege. But not so much that you fully comprehend the moral compromises, the bloodshed that made it all possible.
It's a form of psychological self-protection for the family line.
Necessary, perhaps, for each generation to function without being crippled by guilt. But it meant Diana inherited the emotional fallout, the psychological weight, without necessarily having the full historical framework to understand or process it.
So this bloodline, this legacy, it doesn't end with Diana. It flows directly into the monarchy's future, Prince William.
Indeed. He carries it all through his mother. When he eventually becomes king, he'll actually be the first descendant of Charles II to sit on the throne since Queen Anne died way back in 1714.
That's incredible. So the blood of the Stuart bastards makes it all the way back to the crown.
Along with the Tudor echoes, he's a living vessel of this complex, sometimes dark history, the biological memory of kings who beheaded wives, queens who burned heretics.
Yep.
It's all in there.
But how does it manifest now? If we look at William and Harry, do we see traces of these inherited Spencer traits?
The sources suggest you can see different facets. William's approach seems very cautious, measured, strategic, very focused on stability and duty.
Which sounds a bit like
Like the careful political calculation that allowed Spencer ancestors to survive regime changes, reading the situation, playing the long game, ensuring continuity. He seems to embody that survivor instinct.
Okay, and Harry?
Harry displays more of the rebellious streak, the willingness to break with tradition, to challenge the institution, to adapt dramatically when the current situation feels untenable.
Which also reflects a Spencer trait, the ability to pivot, to change tactics when necessary.
Exactly. That talent for adaptation, sometimes radical adaptation, when circumstances demand it. Both sons, though, clearly exhibit that high emotional intelligence, that ability to connect with people, which was also key to Spencer's survival in complex social courts.
They have advantages Diana didn't, right? More access to history, better psychological support.
Absolutely. There's a greater cultural emphasis now on understanding history, on mental health. They're arguably better equipped to confront this legacy directly, rather than just unconsciously acting it out or suppressing it.
And William's work on mental health, that seems significant in this context.
Hugely significant. By championing mental health awareness, encouraging people to talk openly about struggles, he's directly challenging that old aristocratic, and specifically Spencer, pattern of emotional suppression, of keeping up appearances at all costs.
It's like he's trying to break that cycle of silence.
Precisely. It's a very public push against the kind of strategic emotional control that served his ancestors, but likely came at a high personal cost.
And then there's Harry's move, breaking away from the royal family, moving to America. That feels like the most dramatic departure from the Spencer playbook.
On the surface, yes. Choosing personal authenticity, family privacy, over proximity to the center of power that directly reverses the core Spencer strategy that began back in the Tudor era.
But is there another way to look at it?
Well, some analysis points out echoes. Strategic geographical repositioning during difficult times. Ancestors did that too, sometimes lying low abroad. And the way Harry and Meghan have monetized their story, their brand.
Media deals, books, interviews.
It continues that very Spencer-esque tradition of converting royal drama family narratives into financial security and influence. The methods are modern Netflix and Spotify instead of land grants, but the underlying mechanism of leveraging status and story for gain, it has historical parallels.
So the big question hangs there. What wins out in the end for this generation? The inherited patterns of ruthless survival, or the potential for change, for empathy, maybe Diana's counter-legacy?
Especially when faced with crisis. Will those older, adaptive but ruthless strategies reassert themselves? Or will the conscious choices they make towards mental health, towards challenging norms, prove stronger?
And the stakes are global now, aren't they? This isn't just about the British monarchy.
Not at all. Remember those connections? U.S. presidents like Adams and FDR have Spencer links, European royalty. The skills honed in Tudor courts, strategic manipulation, image management, network building are incredibly potent in today's global media and financial landscape.
Okay, let's circle back to the coat of arms one last time. That black band, the Ben Sable, does it have to just represent darkness?
Maybe not. It represents a choice for William, Harry, and future generations. It could become a symbol of acknowledging the difficult history, taking accountability for it rather than ignoring it.
A commitment to not repeating the mistakes of the past.
Exactly. And those three silver shells on the black band, symbols of pilgrimage, of a journey. They could come to represent the family's long, ongoing journey towards reckoning with its past and maybe towards transformation.
This has been, well, a really intense deep dive. It paints the Spencer bloodline as this incredible living history of survival against the odds, forged in England's most brutal times.
And Diana carried all of it. The biological memory, the cultural weight of every execution, every betrayal, every strategic compromise that allowed her family to rise and endure.
The past isn't dead, is it? It's not even past, as Faulkner said.
It lives on in DNA, in family stories, in unconscious patterns. The struggles of Diana's children, in a way, mirror a bigger human dilemma. How do we deal with the darkness in our own histories, our own inheritance?
And it forces us, the listeners, to think too, doesn't it? How do we honor our own ancestors' struggles for survival?
Even the morally great choices they might have made.
While actively choosing not to repeat their failures. How do we use whatever advantages we have inherited, genetic, cultural, financial, for something better than just self-interest?
That's the challenge. That black band on the Spencer coat of arms, it's a permanent mark of history. But whether it remains a symbol of darkness or becomes an emblem of redemption earned through conscious choice, that story is still being written by the generation carrying that Tudor blood today.